Today we are going to graph sine and cosine graphs that have translations on them. What do I mean by translations?
Up, down, left, right.
Up, down, left, and right.
Down,
Flipped.
Okay. We've already really taken care of the flip yesterday. Because what flips this?
The negative.
The negative out front. So we've already kind of done the flip. All right. So we're going to do 4 examples. First one is y equals 2 times sine of x plus pi. Y equals 2 times sine of x plus pi. Okay, so what looks different about that from what we did yesterday?
It's added.
I've got a plus pi inside the parentheses. Yesterday I didn't have that. Okay. To get started, we're going to ignore that and treat it just like we would yesterday. So the first thing I want to find is amplitude, which is 2. The next thing I want to find is the period. What's the period in this case?
2 pi.
2 pi. Okay. And then my start would be where? In the middle. So I would start at the middle. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to take care of my period marks. So I go to 2 pi. Cut it up. Okay, now I want to come back and take care of my shift. Take care of that plus pi in there. If I have a plus pi on the inside, what do you think that means? It's going to go to the left pi. So this tells me we're going to move to the left pi. Whatever your shift is to the left or to the right, I want to make a note of that and say that's where we're starting at. Normally we start where?
0.
At the y-axis is what I want to hear. Okay. Normally we start on the y-axis. In this case, whenever we shift, we're no longer going to start on the y-axis. We're going to start somewhere else. So in this case, it tells me we're going left pi. So instead of starting at the y-axis, where are we going to start? I'm going to start at negative pi. So right here, I'm going to let myself know that's where we're going to start. Okay. Once I have that, then we graph it just like we did yesterday. Okay. So this is my starting line. It tells me I need to start in the middle. So that means my first mark has to be there. So let me pause and make sure everybody can follow what we just did. Everybody good with how we got that starting spot right there? Okay. We already identified down here at the bottom that we're starting in the middle. And then this tells me that instead of starting at the y-axis, I need to move to the left pi. So that means I'm starting here, and I'm starting in the middle. Okay, so this is my middle. Now I want to identify what the top is and what the bottom is. So how high do I go to get the top, and how low do I go to get to the bottom? 2. So that means this is the top, and this is the bottom. So that means every mark I make has to be on one of those 3 spots, the top, the bottom, or the middle. Okay, notice when I broke up the period, that tells me how far apart everything needs to be. So how far do I need to go to get to my next spot? 3. So if I go 3, am I going to be at the top or the bottom? So I'm going to be at the top. How do I know I'm at the top versus the bottom? Because we were dealing with a positive sign. Positive sign tells me I go to the top first. Okay, I go 3 more, I'm back to the middle. I go 3 more, I'm at the bottom. 3 more, middle. 3 more, I'm at the top. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 more, there's 7. 3 more, there's 8. 3 more, there's 9. All right. And draw your hills and valleys. And put arrows on each end for me. There it is. So, to recap what we did on this, we did the amplitude, the period, and the start, just like we did yesterday. We divided up our period to figure out how far apart everything is. Then, since we had something in the parentheses, that told me I need to go left pi. Since I went left pi, we identified where we're starting instead of the y-axis. So I'm starting here, and it says I'm starting in the middle. So combine those two, tells me my starting spot is here. From there, we just follow the pattern. Questions on that before we move to the second? All right, good. All right, next one. All right, our next one, y equals -4 times cosine of 12 over 11x minus pi. Y equals -4 times cosine of 12 over 11x minus pi.
You have to do the two.
Yes. All right, so amplitude in this case
4.
is 4, period.
You have to do 2 pi times the reciprocal.
2 pi times the reciprocal, so 2 pi times 11 over 12. What does that reduce to? 11 pi over 6 is correct. Okay, and where would it start? On the bottom. All right, so at this point, I want to go figure out where my period is. How far do I need to go to get to 11 pi over 6? 11 spaces. So 11 spaces, that right there is 11 pi over 6. So half of 11 is 5.5. Half of 5.5?
2 and 3/4.
2 3/4. So 2 3/4 would be there. 2 3/4 would be there. All right. Now what?
The right.
All right. I'm going to the right. Okay, but it's not going to be pi. What's different about this problem versus the first problem we did? What'd you say? Nothing wrong being wrong.
There's something in front of the x.
There's something in front of the x. Okay? If there's something in front of the x, you have to, whatever you did to the 2 pi, I also have to do to that. So what did I do to 2 pi? Multiplied by 11 over 12. So whatever I do to 2 pi, I also have to do to this if there's a number right here. Make sense? Okay? So that means I'm going to go to the right, what? 11 pi over 12. Okay? I'm going to go to the right, 11 pi over 12. So now I need to figure out where 11 pi over 12 is. Any ideas on how I'm going to figure out where 11 pi over 12 is? Do that. Everybody hear what he said? If I'm dealing with pi over 6, what would half of pi over 6 be? Pi over 12. So that means pi over 12 is half a space, or whatever you want to call it. So if I had 11 of those, that would give me 11 pi over 12. There's an easier, more efficient way of doing it, though.
Divide by 2.
Divide what by 2? Here's the deal. This number right here is always going to match with one of those spots. So 11 pi over 12 is going to be one of those spots. And here's how you find it. I always take this and divide it by 2. Okay? If you're going to divide a fraction by 2, all you got to do is multiply the denominator by 2. So if I multiply this denominator by 2, I get 11 pi over 12. So that means that spot right there is 11 pi over 12. If I divide that by 2, I get 11 pi over 24. So that means this spot right here is 11 pi over 24. Okay? And then what would I do to get this third and final spot? How is this spot related to this spot?
Oh, that's
It's not double,
half.
it's triple. Okay, so if I take this and multiply by 3, that's going to give me that mark. Okay, but here's the easy thing about it. If it's not this one or this one, what does it have to be? It has to be that one. Okay, so I don't even need to figure out what the number is. Alright. So, instead of starting on the y-axis, where am I going to start? I'm going to start at 11 pi over 12, so I'm going to mark that. Okay, that right there is my start. Okay, and where am I supposed to start? Top, bottom, or middle? I'm supposed to start at the bottom. So I go to this spot. Now I need to figure out what my bottom is. So there's my middle. How much do I go up and down? 4. So there's my top, and there's my bottom. Okay, so I'm starting at the bottom, so that means I go here. That right there has to be my start. Okay, then all my dots have to be how far apart? 2 3/4 is correct. So I go 2 3/4. So since I'm at the bottom, either direction I go, right or left, what does my next dot have to be? Has to be a middle dot. So that's got to be a middle dot. That's got to be a middle dot. Okay, and then I just continue the pattern. So then I've got to be a top, 2 3/4. I've got to be a middle. I'm going to go this direction. I've got to be a top, 2 3/4. I've got to be a middle. I've got 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So I need 2 more. So 2 3/4. 1 2 3/4 puts me here. And then 2 3/4. 1 2 3/4 puts me there. There it is. So again, we found the amplitude, we found the period, we determined we started at the bottom. I break up my period, I come back and I figure out how much my shift is to the right or to the left. Once I figure that out, I identify where my start is. So I match that start with that start, and that tells me my starting location, and then from there, you're just following the pattern. Questions on that? Next one, 2 more. Alright, y equals -3 plus cosine of 3x. Y equals -3 plus cosine of 3x. So amplitude is 1. Period.
You have to do 3 times.
So 2 pi over 3. So 2 pi times 1/3 gives me 2 pi over 3. And start, top, bottom, or middle.
Middle. No, yeah, that's top.
Okay, I'm dealing with cosine, so it's either got to be the top or the bottom. In this case, why is it top? Why is it the top versus the bottom?
Because cosine is 1, which is positive.
Yeah, because cosine is positive right here. This cosine is positive, which tells me I've got to start at the top. All right, so my period is 2 pi over 3. How many spaces to get to 2 pi over 3? 4 spaces is correct. So that's 2 pi over 3. So there's that. All right, so then now we're ready to go talk about our shift. What's our shift in this case? It's down 3. So our shift is down 3. How do I know I had a vertical shift versus a horizontal shift? Yeah, it's outside. It's not inside the parentheses. So if you have something that's not inside the parentheses, it's a vertical shift. So this -3 tells me we're dealing with down 3. If you have a vertical shift, what you want to do is identify where the new middle is. Okay, my middle is normally the x-axis, but where does it need to be now? It needs to be down 3. So my middle is now right there. Okay. Then how much do I go up and down to get my top and bottom?
1.
I go 1. So that means my top is right there, and that means my bottom is right there. Everybody with me? Okay. So now, this start did not move, so we're still on the y-axis. So I'm still there, and it tells me I have to start at the top. So that means my first point is right there. So make sure everybody's with me on how we know that point is right there. Everybody good with me? Okay. And what type of point is this? Top, bottom, or middle? Top, so that means my next one has to be a middle. So the next one has to be a middle, and then we're going to the bottom, and then we're going to the middle, and then the top. So there's 5. I need to keep going until I get 9. So 6, 7, 8, 9. And again, you can always have more than 9, but 9 is the minimum if you have room for it. If you don't have room for it, then obviously you can't do it. Okay. How do you feel about that? Good? All right, last one. Y equals 1 plus 2 sine of 6 over 7x minus pi over 2.
Oh, okay.
Y equals 1 plus 2 sine of 6 over 7x minus pi over 2. All right, amplitude.
2.
Period.
7 pi over 2.
7 pi over 3. Start.
Middle.
At the middle.
Oh.
All right, so I need to figure out how many spaces 7 pi over 3 is. How many spaces? 14 spaces is correct. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 14. Half of 14 would be 7. Half of 7 would be 3.5. All right, so now we're ready to go back and pick up our shifts. So what are my shifts?
Up 1.
Up 1. Okay. And
Right.
right.
Right 4.
What's my number?
Is it 4?
7 pi over 12. Tim, how'd you get 7 pi over 12?
Multiply 7 over 6 times pi over 2.
Multiply 7 over 6 times pi over 2. Because remember, whatever you multiply 2 pi by, you have to multiply that pi over 2 by. So 7 over 6 times pi over 2 gives me 7 pi over 12. So we're going right 7 pi over 12. So 7 pi over 12 has to be one of these bottom marks right down here. So how do I find it? Double the denominator. So if I double the denominator, that means this is 7 pi over 6. If I double the denominator again, that means this is 7 pi over 12. So there it is. Okay, so now I want to mark my new start, and I need to mark my new top, bottom, and middle. So where does my new start need to be? At 7 pi over 12. So there's my new start. Where does my new middle need to be? Up 1. And then how far do I go to get to my top and bottom? I go 2. So that means that's going to be my top. That's going to be my bottom. So to get my very first starting point, I go to the new start. And do I want to go to the top, bottom, or middle?
Middle.
I want to go to the middle because of what I said over here. So I go there, and in the middle, there's my starting value. From there, I go with it. So as I go to the right, is my next one going to be a top or a bottom? Why?
Because it's
I have a positive sign. So the next one's going to be a top. So I go to the top. My next one's got to be a middle. Next one's got to be a bottom. Okay, how far apart is each dot? 3.5. So I go 3.5. Next one's got to be a middle. I go back the other direction. Next one's got to be a bottom, a middle, and a top. That's all I've got written for. Hills and valleys. Put your arrows on it. Remember, every dot you put on there has to be where? Has to be at the top, middle, or bottom. Has to be at the top, middle, or bottom. So make sure all your dots are on the top, middle, or bottom line. So again, in this case, we found the amplitude, we found the period, we found the start. Okay. We found our period mark, we cut it up, found our shifts. Since I went up 1, that means I have a new middle. From there, I went up to find my top. I went down to find my bottom. I had to go right 7 pi over 12, so that means I found a new start value. I combine the two starts together. That tells me where I've got to start. And then from there, everything is following the pattern. Any questions? Okay. On these, the only thing that really gets you in trouble is if you try to do it too fast. If you try to do it too fast, you'll run into trouble. Take it slow, pay attention to what you're doing. Abby, question? What's her question, Brady?
How'd you get 7 pi over 12?
This one?
Yeah.
I did pi over 2. You always take this times the reciprocal of this. So when I multiply those together, I get 7 pi over 12. Any other questions?